Welcome to the Learn to Judge Beer livestream. Pour yourself a beer and join in as we cover everything from assessing and scoring beer through to identifying and fixing faults.
Welcome back. It's Thursday again. Don't they come round quick? So this evening we have Guinness Original. I don't know if you managed to get this one. If you have, spot on. If you haven't, I've also got one of those, which isn't the same, but it's close enough that you'll still get some value out of comparing it with the guidelines. So before we go any further, once again, here's Rich, my co-host.
Hey everyone.
How's everyone doing today? I asked a question at the end of the last session, which was if you wanted me to do an Imperial Stout, because I know Dan Walters is very keen on doing a session for an Imperial Stout, to let me know, because it's hard to buy them in a supermarket. Apparently Morrison's have just got one in, but they didn't have it in my one, so we'll have to see. Let me know if you want us to do an Imperial Stout, even if it means you have to get it from somewhere other than a supermarket, okay? Right, that said, we haven't got any chit-chat this evening. We're going to get straight into the beer. Does that sound like a good idea? All right, let's get straight into the beer then. I've already cracked one open. So if you crack yours open, let's get into the beer and see what people think. Just bear with me as I sort my windows out, because the chat isn't showing. Which always helps if the chat's showing, doesn't it? Pop out chat.
That's good.
All right.
So while Sarah's finding it, so the process for this is much the same with everyone else, everything else. So people want to start thinking about what they're smelling on this beer while we have a look at the description.
Yes, certainly. So the aroma, what we should be getting is a moderate coffee-like aroma, which typically dominates. It may have a slight dark chocolate, cocoa and or roasted grain secondary notes. Esters should be medium low to none. Hop aroma, low to none. It may be lightly earthy or floral, but is typically absent. So let us know down in the chat what you're getting and how well it matches those descriptors. If there's something there that shouldn't be there, let us know. If there's things that should be there that aren't, again, let us know. So for your reminder, for aroma, you should be commenting on malt, hops, esters, and any other aromatics that you get.
So, yeah, I forgot to take one out of the fridge until about an hour ago. So it's a little bit too cold, so it's time to warm it up a bit.
Yeah, mine's a little bit cool. Got it out about 10 minutes ago and it's still at about 9 degrees, so it's just warming up. But I can certainly say, even with it being slightly cold, I'm getting a dominating coffee-like aroma. Okay, Yorkshire Peacocks is getting subtle coffee. We settle coffee in roasted or black malt. Yeah, I'd say there's probably a fair bit of roasted malt in this. I haven't actually seen the recipe for Guinness Original. Whether it's that different to the recipe for the normal draft, I don't know. I have seen clones for the normal draft. Merchants is saying that their beer's either too cold or their smell is broken. It could be either. Both of those are quite possible. A nice one from David Farron there. Dark roast coffee, dark toasted bread crust. We have a loaf in Ireland called a plain loaf, and crust is identical to this. No esters evident, and maybe a light floral hop.
I found there's, I think, James is saying that, yeah, not getting chocolate. Yeah, I get quite a bit of chocolate as this warms up. When I tried this earlier in the week, when it was much warmer, I was getting a lot more chocolate in it than coffee.
I missed a trick there. I didn't try one earlier in the week this time. I did try and get extra bottles when I put an order in from Asda, but they subbed them, so they had to go back. So I'm...
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting one from Keith Bailey there. Initially I got burnt currants, but that's gone. Coffee grounds and overdone toast, no appreciable hop. And then from Matt Ellis, also no hop aroma. Yeah, I'd agree. I'm not getting anything that I'd obviously say, yeah, that's coming from hop. That doesn't mean that that is the right answer. It's just what I'm perceiving. What you perceive may be different. Rich, do you get any hop?
I don't get much in the way of hop. I definitely agree with the currant. I think of it more as raisin, but yeah, it's basically the same thing. Is anyone getting any other fruity notes at all?
Yeah, for me, whenever I think of currant, I always think of like black currant and red currant, but there's also the normal currants as well.
I think in this case we're thinking currant bun type
currants. Exactly. Yeah, that always confuses me a little bit because I always go straight to black currant because it's about my favourite fruit there is. But yeah, raisin, yeah, I'm getting some of that. I can definitely see some of that.
Yeah, there's perhaps a little bit of a hint of earthiness there that could be hop.
Yep.
It's got your floral from Matt. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Nice one from James there. He's jumped ahead a bit, had a swig, breathed out his nose, done retronasal. He's getting, if this will refresh, chocolate and raisins / currants. Yeah, the aromas on this one definitely seem quite more restrained retronasally to me. I'm getting a lot of roast malt, very prominent when I breathe in, but when I breathe out it seems more restrained. There are some slightly different, lighter, fruitier aromas coming through.
So we've got a lot of good descriptors here. Is anyone thinking about what sort of levels they're getting them at? Are these high levels of toast and chocolate and coffee? Or are they medium or are they low?
Alan says he's getting low esters, no hops, and he's saying he's getting, was it caramel and toffee, not coffee and chocolate? And they're definitely flavours that you can get, or aromas you can get also from similar malts. Especially if it's a bit colder, you might not get so much coffee or chocolate. You might get more sweet caramel. I do like this beer. Probably one of the reasons I picked it, but that and availability. So yeah, we've had some good ones. A medium dirt coffee, black treacle. Yeah, I can see a bit of black treacle in there. Yeah, definitely.
Black treacle.
That's a good one from Reese. His is definitely too cold though. He's not getting a lot else, he says. So again, thank you to Reese. He's a mod tonight in the chat. Dan isn't with us tonight. He's got club night. So the Worcester homebrewers happily having a homebrew club meeting tonight, apparently. Not sure if they're doing it in person yet. If they are, I'm extremely jealous. Okay, so we've seen a lot of descriptors given. What are people thinking about the score for the aroma here? You've got 12 points to give. I'm not seeing anything alarming in the style guide compared to the beer. But that's my opinion. I want to know what yours is. How many points out of 12 do you think for this beer?
And if you could also say why, that would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's bang on 12, then
yeah,
that's basically saying because it matches the style guide exactly. But if you do lower it down, just a few words is always good to put in to explain why. It's not because we're saying you're right or wrong. It's very much a case of learning to justify your rating of the beer, if that makes sense. Because if you can explain why, then you can look at how to improve it. If you can't explain why, it's very hard to give appropriate feedback to improve the beer. So I think some clubs were talking about outdoor meetings today, says Reese. Yeah, it's been absolutely hammering down and blowing a gale here, but then again, I'm not a million miles from Cardiff. Okay, so Yorkshire Peacocks, 10. I would like more coffee and chocolate, but definitely to style. That's a fair comment, yeah. Good justification as well.
The level for the aroma in the description is moderate, but it should dominate.
Matt Ellis says 9. I think most of the flavours are there, but I'd say it feels quite subtle. I don't think it's smash in your face expected, but coffee chocolate is very muted.
And Matt's giving it a perfect 12.
Yeah, we've got an 11 from David Farron. Chocolate aromas aren't really there. I'd say a 12 from Matt, as you said, and 7 or 8 from Reese. I mean, the one thing I would say in response to David's comment about it needs to be exceptional to get a 12, it doesn't necessarily need to be exceptional from the point of view of the people who'd be proctoring an exam. It just needs to match what's on the style guide. If it gives you everything in there that it says it should, it doesn't miss anything out, it doesn't have anything in that shouldn't be there, then theoretically it should get a 12.
And hits the levels in the description.
Yeah, of course. Valid point there. This one, I agree. I don't think it does match the levels properly. What do you think, Rich? I'll let you go first on this one rather than me.
This one came out to about 10 on this for me. I think there's people have been saying I think there's a bit too much coffee. Too much chocolate in the aroma. It's more than a slight dark chocolate. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's close.
Yeah. I'd say the coffee isn't totally dominating as it's warmed up a bit. It's slightly restrained for my taste compared to a moderate dominating aroma. Slight dark chocolate, yeah, I'd agree. Yeah. It's maybe a little bit too much of that. In a way, it's muted. Yeah, I'd say 9, 10. So if you're along those sort of lines, 8, 9, 10, 11, then I'd say you're in the right spot on this one. Right, so just wanted to remind everyone that if this was a tasting exam, you're expected to come within 7 points in total of the proctor's consensus score. The proctor's consensus score isn't always the score that all the proctors gave it. You'd normally have 3 of them. Their scores may range by a few points each, and they come to a consensus score which they agree on, and that is what you're expected to match. Okay, let's move on. Appearance. So just giving it a quick extra pour to top the glass up a bit. The head was hanging around, which is good. This one isn't a nitrogenated beer. This one's just carbonated, but it's got a good long-lasting head on it. What are we looking for the appearance on this one? Jet black to very deep brown with garnet highlights in colour. According to Guinness, Guinness beer may appear black, but is actually a very dark shade of ruby. It's opaque, a thick, creamy, long-lasting tan to brown-coloured head. Is characteristic when served on nitro, but don't expect the tight, creamy head on a bottle beer. So what
these?
Go on, Rich.
These really dark beers, it's often worth getting a light, like your phone, and see if you can see any light through it, because that shows up the ruby they're describing really well.
Yeah, I don't know if the camera will focus on that, but that's it. That's my torch shining through the beer there.
So yeah, the garnet highlights are that. If you get some light through it, or sometimes you can just get some light through the corner of your glass if there's some bright lights in the room, and you'll start seeing some more ruby colours.
So hopefully that's answered James' question about the garnet highlights. Description bang on, says David Farron. It's a clear, deep ruby colour with a tan head that lasts well. Sounds reasonable to me. Mm-hmm. Anyone want to give it a score? Again, for appearance, you've only ever got 3 to award to begin with. Realistically, it's the one that generally you'll award full marks in nearly every time.
Yeah, I've quite often award 2s in there if they've got beers which either look like soup and aren't supposed to.
Gosh, yeah.
or the head just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Often those are signs that there's going to be a lot of other low scores.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, that's quite common with New England, unfortunately. You tend to get them looking like brown sludge or soup. Yeah,
if the colour's right out as well, but yeah. If you've got, like an American light lager that you can't see through.
Yeah. Yeah, and normally with only 3 to award, I just find that sort of I tend to be a little bit more lenient on appearance than on others.
I'm usually a bit lenient about haze at a low level, because remembering at most competitions the bottles might have been handled perfectly well. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance they've actually had something roused off the bottom a little bit. So I tend to be a little bit of haze. That's fair enough. If it looks like soup and isn't supposed to, then you'll lose a point or so.
Yeah. So for James, their head isn't quite tan. It's a bit more pale than that. So maybe a 2, though could give it a 3. Yeah, I mean, if it was less than 2, I'd say you're probably drinking a different beer to me. But yeah, for me, it would be a straight up 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously, only you can tell about the beer that's in front of you, so you can only score it as to what you see. So if you scored it 2, I'd have no qualms, and I won't be querying that at all. Okay, moving on to flavour then.
That's the good bit.
Yeah. Moderate roasted grain or malt flavour with medium to high hop bitterness. Finish can be dry and coffee-like to moderately balanced with a touch of caramel or malty sweetness. Typically has coffee-like flavours, but also may have a bittersweet or unsweetened chocolate character in the palate that lasts into the finish. Balancing factors may include some creaminess. Now, you don't often see that in descriptors, so the fact that they've said, yes, it can include it here is distinctive to this style compared to most others where you won't see them mention creaminess at all and it's out of style. Medium low to no fruitiness and medium to no hop flavour, although often earthy. The level of bitterness is somewhat variable, as is the roast character and the dryness of the finish. So you should always allow for interpretation by brewers on this one. So let's see what you think of the flavour. So going back to what I've said before, remember for each thing you're looking at three things. What is it? So for instance, coffee. How much of it? Is it low, medium, high? And what type? Is it a strong dark coffee, a light cold brewed coffee? Things like that to be thinking about. So what, how much, and what type?
Yeah, good first call out of burnt caramel. Yeah, I could go with some burnt sugars definitely. Dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, earthy hop as well. Yeah, those are all reasonable for me.
The other thing you might see in the style guide quite often, because a lot of them are written by Americans, it might be described as bitter chocolate instead of dark chocolate. So that's just something to bear in mind when you're looking at the style guide. Here in the UK, we tend to call it dark chocolate, or however you pronounce the word dark. I know I've got a strange accent, which makes it sound like dirk. Yeah, again, burnt caramel. Oh no, that was just a duplicated message. It's come through twice. That was the one I was looking at. Oh, that one went back to the appearance from Tom. Didn't get a very good head on that one. Quickly disappeared. Alan's getting lightly burnt toast. I can see that.
Marmite-like flavour from Tom is an interesting one. Marmite flavours are often thought of as being sort of off flavours mostly. There's a signs possibly of autolysis, but that's really rare.
I haven't had that one come through yet. Marmite. Yeah, for some reason Marmite hasn't come up on my screen. It always seems a bit strange when it puts chat up for me because I'm streaming from this end. Reese came up with some nice descriptions there. There's a moderate roasted grain, dry finish. Coffee is lighter in the flavour than in the aroma. A dark, high cocoa chocolate, more noticeable in flavour than the aroma. Yeah, I can go with that. Again, if you like your dark chocolates or you like something to compare it against, try some of the higher percentage green and blacks. They're very good to see exactly what dark chocolate's like, whereas some of the dark chocolates are actually just milk chocolate with a bit less milk in. David Farron. Oh, hang on. What have you just seen?
Not unpleasant sound.
Oh, there's
cocoa chocolate. Yeah.
Finally, the Marmite comments come through to me. It's lagging a bit. Right. David Farron, dark roasted coffee dominates with a little sweetness from the malt and moderate hop bitterness, giving a really nice dry finish. Dark chocolate in the aftertaste, which lingers. Yeah, definitely got some lingering chocolate there.
I think James's split up of Marmite flavours is quite interesting. It's saying we're getting the dry bitterness of Marmite, but not the umami. Which, I think the umami is the main thing for autolysis.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have had autolysis, or what I believe to be autolysis, but only in about 2 beers that I've ever judged at competition. It's one that does happen, but rarely. Very rarely. Unlike oxidized, which happens quite often.
Yeah. So is anyone getting any fruit or fruit-like flavours?
We had quite a lot of people mentioning currants and raisins in the aroma. Is that there in the flavour as well? Darren's mentioned the draft cans have a much more creamy mouthfeel. A lot of that is down to the nitrogen, because this beer's got a lot higher carbonation level in it than That one has. So if I pour this one...
Yeah, it'd be interesting to try them side by side.
All right, just for shits and giggles, does anyone still think that two-part pour has any purpose? Let me know what you think in the chat.
Okay, apparently there's a recipe in the Brewing Beers Like Those You Buy book, the Guinness clone.
I'm trying to remember if that's the one that I've heard less flattering things about some of the recipes or not.
Yeah, I'm peering up at my bookshelf. I have one of the ones in that style that... No, mine's not that one. Mine's the Mike Olson one.
Yeah, I haven't got that one either.
Don't bother. It's got three recipes in it, basically. No, and that's being far too rude. A whole lot of British bitter recipes that are very similar.
So, David Farron says, anything else is blasphemy. The two-part pour for real draft, but not for cans. Okay, do you know where the two-part pour came from? The first part was fresh beer. The second part was old stale beer. When you're pouring all out of the same keg, it has no purpose. It's just theatre that slows down serving beer.
Well, we've got some mention of fruit from James here. So we've got dark bitter currants and stone fruits at low moderate levels early in the flavour.
Yep. Less so now from James. And what was the other one? I just saw a slight blackberry following the bitter aftertaste from Nathan.
Yeah, but I'll definitely go with some blackberry in there.
Yep. You can prove anything with facts, says David. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the two-part pour doesn't hurt. I've got nothing against it unless I'm waiting for a beer after the person who's ordered 10 pints of a two-part pour. Then I've got something against it. Yeah, there's a lot of good comments coming in. The cocoa nibs flavour is pretty strong, like toast and a bit plum-like. So yeah, definitely more fruitiness coming through now.
So Jack's asking how to separate it out, the hop bitterness from the roasted malts. Really, it's what else is around it. What it tastes as a wider experience. So if bitterness is rarely on its own, even in the lingering aftertaste, will usually be something else there. And if that's roasty or herbal or spicy or whatever, that gives you a strong hint of where it is. But on a beer like this, it's going to be a mix. So you'll get some from the roast and some from the hops.
And a very valid point from Nicholas Davis, getting more fruit as the beer warms. So side by side, that's the original in the pint glass. That's the draft. The bubbles in this one are practically non-existent to very tiny. So that's where it's mainly had nitrogen in the can, whereas this was mainly nearly all CO2 from the bottling process. This one, a lot higher carb, which lightens up the mouthfeel quite a bit. If you've ever had a flat beer, and if you judge at competitions often enough, you will get plenty of them, then they can be quite syrupy. Whereas the same beer carbonated can be quite a lot lighter in mouthfeel.
Yeah, we had an example of exactly that in some beers we were judging yesterday. In fact, an uncarbonated triple just tasted really sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, with a bit of CO2, it could be much better.
Yeah, Jack's come back to your descriptions for how to distinguish the bitterness and sources, and he said it sounds like you should probably stop trying to separate them out in this case. in this case, that's probably a fair call. Normally, as Rich said, you've got a lot more hints to it if you've got a hoppier beer or a malty beer with next to no hop.
And I wouldn't really try with something, especially with something like this, to say how much of it is from each. If you're saying that the roast is contributing to the bitterness, that's probably enough. But obviously, you're giving the strength of the bitterness overall.
Interesting comment there from Richard Merton about the recipes. The grain bills are almost the same between the Graham Wheeler and Dave Lyne's recipes, but the hop bills are very different, and Dave Lyne uses a lot more of them. All right, so we've talked quite a bit now about the flavour. Is there anything that people want to add before we move on to scoring? So we're thinking about malt, hops, fermentation characteristics, balance, the finish / aftertaste, and other flavour characteristics. I don't seem to get it as much with the original as I do with the draft, but you can get a slight, almost lactic note sometimes from the draft, but I'm not getting that at all from the original.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories about versions of Guinness having some soured beer in them. I'm not sure I believe many of them, especially on the scale they're brewing it now. They just won't have the time to do it.
No. So from James, much like the aroma, the flavour is fairly subdued. I get quite a bit of flavour, but I also find it, what's the word? It almost feels diluted and watery in terms of some of the flavours. They feel like they should be more prominent than they are.
Yeah, I'm not too. I could go with the moderate levels on this. Some of the ones that are medium to high are a bit low, really.
Yeah.
So some of our descriptors are moderate on the roast and the malt, medium to high on the hop business, maybe. Dry finish, probably. It may be a little bit. It's probably at the lower end of the style descriptor.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to being out of it in most of them.
Yeah. Medium low to no fruitiness and medium to no hop flavour. Variable bitterness. So yeah. Subdued maybe, but it matches the style guidelines. I'd say yes.
Yeah.
In broad strokes, I'm not failing to pick up anything that should be there, and I'm not getting anything that shouldn't. So a lot of it's going to come down to how well you think the levels match what's expected. So should we move on to scoring then?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so flavour, 20 points. If you think it's a perfect example that matches everything that should and shouldn't be there, then 20 points. If you think it's got some room to grow, then some less. And just let us know why or what you'd like to see more or less of.
There's someone has mentioned, I saw astringency. David.
Yeah, David.
Astringency. Yeah, we normally talk about that more in the mouthfeel section. All right, separating flavour and mouthfeel is sometimes a little challenging. But the light astringency from the roasted grains is in the description.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, that shouldn't be harsh or really mouth puckering.
Yeah, I mean, you're generally going to get some astringency on any beer that uses a lot of highly kilned malt. But yeah, it's generally in mouthfeel, as Rich says. It's actually one of the key points that's called out that you should comment on in the mouthfeel section. That's okay. No need to say that, David. We all get caught out on these score sheets, even when we've been filling them in for 20 beers already that day. But yeah, I mean, I've got this terrible habit of just bunging feedback wherever it fits in, because sometimes I'll go a bit mad on overall impression, and then it's like, well, I'll just fit that bit of feedback in at the bottom of flavour or whatever.
Yeah. I'm lucky that we're using PDF score sheets for the competitions at the moment, and they keep reducing the size of the font so you can fit more in, which is quite nice.
Yeah. But also stops you knowing when you've written enough, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So
from Robert, a touch of caramel or other sweetness will push it up for them from 17. Speller says 18. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name. It's not one I've ever read out before. Nice strong hop bitterness, slightly lacking in creaminess, but may just be in comparison to Guinness Draught. Yeah, it definitely less creamy than the Draught. Totally agree with you there.
And once again, creaminess is usually in the mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're aiming for with creaminess.
So yeah, coffee flavours seems like a very broad statement, not the sort of coffee that I really enjoy. Closer to a Nescafe than a fresh bean. Yeah, coffee's a very wide brush.
Yeah, I often call this out as quite a dark roast coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've been drinking some fancy coffee shop coffees from not from Starbucks, then then yeah, this isn't that sort of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's one of the things I've been trying to do more of recently is try different roast levels of coffee and different brewing techniques to try and improve my descriptors as well. Because otherwise you just end up drinking the same coffee all the time, and it's like, no, that doesn't taste like coffee. So, Alan Manley, 17, a good level of bitterness. The chocolate comes through more after the roastiness perts as it warms, but it keeps a bite at the end. Tom Dolly, the bottle version lacks a little creaminess, but very close to descriptor. Yeah.
Nicholas has gone down to 15. He thinks there could be a richer palette of flavours. The levels of coffee and chocolate could be higher, a bit more complexity. Yeah, it's probably that. There definitely could be more of these, but I think as we were saying, I think it's at the bottom corner of the style, as opposed to being out. But yeah, it's worth calling out a bit more.
Yeah. 16 from Reese. Flavours still a bit muted, but enjoyable.
James is taking the coffee descriptions to the other end. Under extracted drip, cold brew, medium dark roast.
Slash espresso, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can go mad with some descriptions sometimes. That's certainly more data than I'll try to put in 1 point for coffee.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to if you are interested in sitting the exam, your descriptors are going to be compared against the proctors. So you want to try and not be so specific that you've got no hope of matching anyone, but also specific enough that it sounds similar to what the proctors have got. If you end up going into too much detail, you can tip it right out of what the proctors have described.
Yeah, and try not to be too UK specific in the words you use, because often the people doing the scoring are American. That they do the biscuit does mean British biscuit as opposed to American biscuit. But yeah, if you start mentioning fig rolls or something, they'll never have no idea what they are.
Yeah, it's like when they go on about graham crackers, which always look like graham crackers to me, but I always hear them call them graham crackers, and it's like they're just not a thing over here, really. So it's hard to actually get hold of them to see what they're trying to describe. Nathan Edwards, 15. Flavour is homogenised and watery. Yeah, I can see a little element of that to it. It's not as prominent as I would like, personally. As with Richard, I don't think it's necessarily out of style for what it says, but it's definitely at the low end.
Yeah.
Nick, I tend to be a bit tight with my scoring, I've been told. Who on earth would dare tell you that, Nick? No, actually, he's never done one of my beers, so I can't comment one way or the other. But watery is a very valid descriptor here, like a diluted coffee, says Reese. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also this style is at the lighter end of the Irish stouts, so it's never going to be as punchy as an export or an imperial for that matter.
Steve Plampton told Nick that he scores his beers too low. Well, generally, Steve's scores and mine are pretty much in line. So if Steve says up your scores a bit, then you might want to consider it. Mind you, we did almost come to blows over a stout at one competition. I think we were like 15 odd points out at one point. He hated it. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, those are always the interesting ones because it's as you start talking about it, you realise what each other is tasting. Sometimes you can never get to agreement, but most of the time you get along.
I mean, he ended up tasting an off flavour. I didn't. We called in the head judge. We came to a consensus between the three of us.
Yeah.
Happy days. And that's the way we tend to do things at competitions. It's all very amenable, and whilst I say we almost came to blows, it's obviously not the case. Right, so mouthfeel then. Oh, my score for that. Yeah, I'd say if you were 17, 18, you're probably around the range I would have given it.
Yeah, I agree. I was ended up with 18. Maybe a little generous, but I'm a nice judge sometimes.
Yeah. And again, we've mentioned this before, that the more experience you get, unless you're having a bad day, you do tend to be a bit more generous. You've got a better idea of what's a stunning beer and what you need to hold some points back for, because the next one's going to be better. So, mouthfeel then. Medium light to medium full-bodied, with a somewhat creamy character, particularly when served with a nitro pour. The can is, the bottle isn't. Low to moderate carbonation. For the high hop bitterness and significant portion of dirt grains present, this beer is remarkably smooth. It may have a lighter stringency from the roasted grains, although harshness is undesirable. What do people think about that? Does that describe the beer? Is there anything that's missing? Is there anything that the beer has that doesn't reach those levels? Let's see your descriptions for mouthfeel. Remember, for mouthfeel, we should be commenting on the body, the carbonation, warmth if present, creaminess, astringency, and other palate sensations. So other palate sensations could be anything from tingling on your tongue from carbonation, or burning from...
The fact they put loads of chilies in it, or
that they've just fermented at 40 and it wasn't Kvike.
Yeah.
40C, not 40F.
Some of the alcohol things mix between mouthfeel and flavour.
Mm-hmm.
The high alcohol beers, or ones with bad alcohol problems. So what have we got? Medium body, fairly high carbonation, which I think could be on board with the style. I think that's quite a good call on carbonation. I think the carbonation is a bit high for the style, and I think that may be causing some of the things we've been talking about earlier.
Yeah, quite possibly. Nick says he thinks he might have been stewarding for us too the day that we had that stout. Yeah, it was probably a memorable one. Yeah, it's not often that judges fall that far apart on the score on the initial comparison. So Richard says it's at the lower end of medium light to medium full bodied. Yeah, no, I can agree with that. It's medium, but yeah, certainly at the low end of it, not the high end.
I think once again the carbonation makes that feel lower than it is a bit.
Yeah. Medium to high carbonation, which gives a carbonic twang, which is certainly one of the things you'd mention under other palate sensations. So yeah. Absolutely. Thin and not creamy. Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that for the bottled beer. The canned one's definitely creamier. Not very creamy and quite high carbonation from Alan, who's given it 4 out of 5. Speller says something that I totally agree with there. As the carbonation drops, the mouthfeel is watery. Yeah, it certainly can get watery at times. Reese D, just at the bottom of the edge of medium light body, little to no creaminess, moderate carbonation, dry lingering finish straying into astringency. So yeah, quite a few people calling out the astringency. It's definitely expected in beers that use this higher percentage of highly kilned malts or roasted malts. So yeah.
Yeah, and there's a descriptor say, light is allowable.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone who's mentioning astringency, well done. Not everyone picks it up. Not everyone understands it. The fact that so many people are picking up on it is very good. If you've never detected astringency, one of the things they do say is to suck an old tea bag. That will give you some idea what a tannic astringency is like. It doesn't appear exactly that way in beer, but it gives you some sort of idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's
So James says slight astringency, no alcohol bite, maybe a little effervescent earlier in the bottle. Yeah, it did start quite fizzy. So what was it supposed to be? Low to moderate carbonation. Yeah. I would have said it was moderate high.
Yeah, I agree.
It has dropped off quite a bit now because I poured it quite some time ago, but yeah. Richard isn't getting the astringency that others do.
Yeah, it is quite low for this compared to some other stouts.
And in truth, not everyone always will.
Yeah.
Some people just don't get it. Others just think it's normal for that type of beer and don't really notice it. But yeah, for me, I'd certainly get, if I can just bung the other camera on for... So for astringent, it says a puckering, lingering harshness and or dryness in the finish aftertaste. A harsh graininess or huskiness. And I do get a little bit of harsh graininess lingering at the back of my mouth. So that's, to me, what I'm picking up in this one. But it doesn't mean that all the bottles are experienced exactly the same. God knows that even when you're producing at this scale, there's bottle variation from the way they've been kept, the number of batches they've got out there and everything.
Yeah, and what temperature people got it out when they opened it. All of these will make some difference.
Yeah, I mean, at least normally in competition, you've got 2 judges sat across the table drinking beer from exactly the same bottle.
Yeah.
So it's normally a lot easier to agree on things there than in a situation like this where we're all drinking different beer from a different bottle that's been kept in different conditions and is at different temperatures. So I find it amazing that most of the time we're all within 1 or 2 or 3 points of each other, because there are so many variables doing it like this, that is a very good range to be in. Okay, so we've had a lot of good calls on the mouthfeel. So let's see scores then. We've had a 4 out of 5 from Alan Manley. Anyone else want to give it a score? So we're thinking of body, carbonation, warmth, creaminess, astringency, and other palate sensations, and how well they match the descriptors on the style guide.
James is suggesting 3 or 4, plausible. Yeah, your focus a bit. Yeah, the primary focus is the body and the carbonation. The others are out by a little bit. Four out of 5 from David.
Nice comment from David there. It's killing him. As a Guinness drinker, the draft cans don't even come close, and his local doesn't open till next week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the draft cans are definitely a substitute. However, they're better than no substitute from my point of view. So, draft Guinness, the cans tends to be my rugby drink every time Six Nations comes round. I'll have a couple of cases of that come in at the start of the season each time.
So we've got a mix of 3s and 4s, I think.
Yeah. Body and carbonation add to leave something that really isn't creamy. Other than that, it's the style. 4 to 5, prefer it a little more towards a medium body. 3 out of 5, lacks body and creaminess. Carbonation's too high. I'm certainly not seeing any comments here that I'll disagree with.
Yeah, I think with my opinion with the body is it's right down at the bottom there again at medium light. It's not like what's the light body? Once again, back to American light lager.
Yeah, I mean,
it was more body there than water.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, this would be a 4.
Yeah, I think I agree though. I can understand the 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's not hitting all the high spots. It's just carbonation perhaps a little high for me, which did impact on the other sensations that you're supposed to get on the mouthfeel.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the high carbonation the people are getting seems to match up with some of the reduced flavours and things could easily be contributing to it.
Yep. So yeah, we're seeing 3s and 4s mainly.
Yeah.
So I'd say for me it would be a 4. Rich, for you?
Yeah, 4.
Cool. All right, so that moves us on to overall impression. And it's always good to get to this section because from the brewer's point of view, this is the most important bit because this is where we tell them how to make it better. So in this section, we'd like to see some comments on how much you enjoyed or didn't enjoy drinking it and any suggestions for improvement. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing from nearly everyone, I'd expect the carbonation level to be called out here. What advice? Let's see how you'll word the advice to the brewer here. Because again, the thing to remember is we shouldn't be making any assumptions on process. Mm-hmm. That's very hard to do. Because it's very easy to just say a bit less priming sugar, but that doesn't help if it's forced carbonated.
Yeah.
So I tend to hedge my bets and say a bit less priming sugar or turn the pressure down if you force carbonating.
Yeah, that one I just tend to say lower carbonation and leave it up to them to work out what I mean.
True. That's a very valid point.
There are a lot of things when you start getting off flavours that get into fairly standard sentences that look at water, sanitation, and bottling process. Somewhere in there, something went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to come up with some sort of standardised language, that's true.
Yeah. Because if you've got something like an infection in it, from one bottle, it's hard to tell whether that was in the bulk, in the bottle. So you're going to mention both as options.
Yeah.
Though sometimes if you've got enough flavour and you're being generous, you'll have called for the second bottle. and so you might have a hint whether it was just a single bottle problem.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, if I try a beer and it is that bad that it's got no chance of advancing, that's when I'll call for the second bottle.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is call for the second bottle, open it up, and it actually...
It's amazing beer, yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, even just the first beer that didn't taste quite right was still better than most of the other beers in the flight. Then you've got a problem because you've got no second bottle to put forward.
Yeah, it's usually when something is obviously wrong.
Yeah. Like it's a stout entered into a light lager category. Yeah. I mean, people will probably be in disbelief about that, but I see it at least once every time I run a competition, or every 2 or 3 times I judge. Someone at the table will go, "Oh, this has just been entered as a whatever," and it's completely the wrong beer. Obviously, they picked up the wrong bottle.
It's a lot less common than it used to be when we used to do the label swapping thing, where you basically, in competitions a few years ago, you sent it with a label rubber banded onto it, and we took that off and replaced it with a sticker, and that process was prone to getting the wrong stickers swapped around with the wrong labels. The idea there was to make sure that the judges were completely blind to whose beer they were. With the current one, they have barcodes and numbers on them that are pretty obscure. You have to make a real effort to cheat. So, and we assume our judges aren't, especially if there's a pair of judges who usually don't know each other that well. It will be really hard to cheat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it got to the point where for the Welsh, I always did apart from one year where Stuart did everything for me and I didn't touch a single bottle of beer until I got to the venue, which was in itself scary because I didn't know if there was any beer there or not. Apart from that, I always did the whole relabeling process myself. But then when they brought out the barcode labels, it was just like, well, if we don't trust the judges, then there's more than one way to tell whose entry it is anyway. Yeah, mine's the only best bitter put in a Trappist bottle.
Yeah.
Right, so we're seeing some good descriptors coming in. Generally good and to style and drinkable, it would benefit from a little more sweetness and body to balance the bitterness. Slightly less carbonation would allow the flavours to shine. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The higher level of carbonation impacted flavours, aromas, and just generally dulled all the sensations from the beer. Lacking body perhaps requires a higher mash temp or adding oats to make the bottle version smoother, or a lower carbonation. Yeah, it does assume that the brewer is mashing.
Yeah.
In which case, if they had done extract, they could have, for instance, used more extract. If they did a kit, then tough.
Yeah, there's not much option there, really.
Yeah.
I suppose there's the options.
Brew shorter.
Yeah, or using something like maltodextrin or something to up the body.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
you're getting into real technical ways of solving it.
Yeah.
Saying increase the body. Mash temperature is worth mentioning.
Yeah. I mean, most people who are brewing would understand sort of by that the alternatives for extract is to just use a bit more extract or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, for kit brewing, and I have known kit beers to win competitions. I didn't know it at the time until afterwards when I was told, but it has happened. But about the only option they've got is just to not dilute the kit as much and brew, say, 18 litres instead of 23. Good example of the style, generally in line with the guidelines. Increase the body by increasing mash temp, adding caramel malts or brown malt perhaps for complexity. So yeah, a bit more complexity from Durka malt, either from malt or extract. 7 out of 10, an easy drinking beer that meets most of the guidelines, benefit from a touch more body and lower carbonation. For a 4.2% beer, very enjoyable, maybe somewhat lacking in body and depth of flavour relative to the stronger stouts more typically sold today. It's true. Unfortunately, a lot of the stouts commonly sold today don't actually fit in, well, I suppose they fit in experimental, because that's the one style that nothing is out of style in unless it fits in another style. But yeah, I mean, you've got all these super sticky, sickly, sweet pastry stouts and things like that.
Yeah, but we still got a fair few oatmeals going around, and some of the other sort of low to mediums, along with silly pastry stouts, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you do still get a couple of milk stouts in most competitions as well. That's another fairly common style. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing what, 7s, 8s.
Yeah. Yeah, if you haven't put a score in, if you want to stick one in, that would be good.
So yeah, I mean, people seem to be congregating around that 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I think either of those scores is totally fair for this. Overall, the beer is majority, more or less to style. My feedback would be to reduce the carbonation, perhaps push the body or the coffee a little bit more. So a bit more dark malt in there would help with both of those. It's to style, but right at the bottom end of the style. Which for me harms the drinking pleasure of the beer, because I like them to have a bit more than that.
Yeah, there is the old trick to scoring high in competitions is to enter towards the top corner of the style rather than the bottom corner.
Yeah. Or at least push one of the elements, if not all of them. Because, I mean, if you drink 10 totally average beers in a row, the one that's likely to win is the one that stands out above the others for something, as long as it's something positive.
Yeah, one that has the positive things in it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've hit time, but I've got nothing happening, so if anyone wants to hang around for Q&A for 10 minutes or something, that works for me. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to chuck them in the chat. Overall, I'd say everyone did really well this evening. Your scores were more or less in line with what Rich and myself thought of the beer. If you were overall within 7 points of what we thought, then you were probably close enough to get a pass on a taste test for this beer, because most of you called out all the things we would. Just bear in mind that when calling things out, to always comment on the character of it and how much of it, because that's the one thing that does tend to get missed. People will say coffee, for instance, but it's like, was it low, medium or high? And without that, you're not going to get the points for the descriptive ability or the perception.
Yeah, and for the matching the proctors, if you are calling out something like coffee, if you've got the word coffee in there, adding more sub-descriptors is fine. If the proctor has only said coffee, you'll still match up.
Mm. Thanks, Eugene.
If people just ask questions, I'll be back in a sec.
Yeah, no trouble. I mean, I'll give it 5 minutes, give people a chance to ask a question if they want to. Otherwise, I'm quite happy to call it an evening. I'm now on the draft. So this has been poured a little while. It hasn't got that really thick head anymore, but it's still got head on there, which, considering I poured this 20 minutes ago, is very good. The wine of my people, says David Farron. Thanks, Matt. It was great having you join us. I'm glad you enjoy it. We've got... Where are we? Show. I've got 3 beers left on the list. After that, we'll have to see how time goes. We're getting into the summer then. People will start to have holidays and things, so let me know if you want to keep on going past that. So the next beer up is Theakston's Old Peculiar, which is a lovely beer. A Newcastle brown ale, which is quite divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it is a good one to get your descriptors and your scoring in order. And then for a more modern beer, we've got the Thornbridge Jamestown New England IPA or Hazy IPA. And that's all I've got planned at the moment. If you'd like to see more after that, we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks' time once I know what I'm doing. Or if there's another judge who would like to step up and do a couple of sessions with or without Rich or whatever, that would be great. Is it not London Pride next week? Is it? I've got
the list.
Let me check the. I've got too many lists, obviously. London Pride. I remember buying a London Pride. Now you mention it.
I thought somewhere on the list. Did we get to James's question on?
No, I haven't. So by all means, go for that. Whilst I try and work out this.
Yeah, it's fine to put things like would like the recipe on there. There used to be a checkbox at the bottom of one of the versions of the score sheet that said I'll finish the sample, I'll finish a pint, send me the recipe. So yeah, I probably wouldn't put it on the exam score sheet, but on one for a competition. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yes, on the video description it does say Fuller's London Pride next week, so let's do Fuller's London Pride next week and change the ticker. Fuller's London Pride without a capital R in the middle of it. Control X. Seventeenth of June, 10th of June. So where have I gone wrong here? That's there. Yeah, trouble is with all the copying and pasting, something obviously got dropped somewhere. Sorry, folks. So 3rd of June, not the 3rd. 3rd of June is Theakston Old Peculiar.
Ooh, category in question for exporting the porter. So we're thinking here, strong hoppy porter. Depends really where it's ended up. It could end up in American porters. It's not that far off that, some of them.
Sorry, I missed that one. Scroll down.
Where else would I put it? As we said, anything can go experimental in the end.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the only rule for experimental is it cannot fit anywhere else. So where would I think of putting that? Resource 2 full, 2 box. There we go. Okay. Where would I think of putting the? Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
I don't think it would fit under the Irish stouts. I think it would be the American ones.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, the closest I think it is the Colonel ones. Yeah, I think it's closest is an American porter. So there you're looking at. Yeah, there's a hop aroma variety. Is anywhere from low to high, so you can fit pretty much anything in it. From memory, that one is quite roasty, but I haven't had one in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a while for me as well, though I do like their export stout. Last time I had London Pride, it was a sour pint in a hotel in London and it was putrid.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's not normally like that. You're okay.
James said about the Old Peculiar wooden pins. They sell once a year, and loads of people have got. Quite a few people have got them for putting homebrew in now.
Oh, nice! I didn't know that.
They're nice little casks, like sort of that big. They're like 20 litres.
Oh, nice.
Quite a nice size.
So yeah, someone asked what the Impy Stout from Morrison's was. Yeah, it was the North Star, I believe. But they didn't have it in my one, so I'm not sure. That's what it was supposed to be, shall we say. But your mileage may vary. I don't normally use Morrison's, so I don't know if they do local beer selections. Like here, for our Tesco's, we get a Welsh beer selection in. So whilst everyone else was getting Buxton Rain Shadow, which is an absolutely stunning stout, we were getting Barry Island IPA and stuff like that from Brains. I know which I'll prefer. Barry Island IPA can get in the sea. If you've never had the privilege of trying Barry Island IPA, do. It's something everyone should experience once in their life. North Star is being phased out, apparently. So, yeah, I mean, I honestly don't think we're going to get a decent Imperial Stout that's available in 2 out of the 3 main supermarkets. Thanks, Alan. Really appreciate the sessions. It makes for a good Thursday evening. It's really educational. Thank you both for your time. You're welcome, Alan. It's been a good revision for me. Whilst I've been called upon to judge a couple of the inter-club competitions, I know a lot of the judges that join us regularly haven't had that experience, so it's good for them to at least have something, and a lot of people are enjoying these Thursdays to get their palates back in line again. And it's always nice to get that confirmation when you're comparing against other judges and you're scoring in line with them, because there's always that element of you're putting yourself on the line a little bit by putting your opinion out there. So to find out that other people are experiencing the same as you is always a nice affirming thing. David Farron, loving these sessions, really informative for a novice like myself. I think Jack's summed up my opinion of Barry Island IPA quite well. Yeah. And so has Reese, but never mind. Yeah, it's a celebrity collaboration, which unfortunately I don't think highlights the ability of anyone, and it certainly doesn't improve people's opinion of Barry Island. So yeah, all right, we'll call it an evening there then.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks everyone for turning up. I'm glad everyone's still enjoying these sessions. So, correcting what I said earlier, it is not Old Peculiar next week. It is Fuller's London Pride. So go and grab yourself a London Pride, and if you've already got a Theakston, then you're ahead for the week after.
Well, we have one last question up from.
Oh, go for it.
We've not talked about water or yeast other than the Duvel. Yeah, so a lot of the ones the beers we've had recently have had pretty neutral yeasts in them, and the water has been the right water for that beer. We've probably got something. Like I said, looking at the ticker as it goes past, we will have something more. In fact, the next two, the London Pride and the Old Peculiar, are both a bit more yeast focused. So I suspect we'll be talking more about yeast derived esters and things with those two.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's like Duvel was very, very heavily yeast influenced. And it's the same with some other styles. You get those Belgian ones where the yeast is a very large part of making the beer what it is. You get sour beers which, without the yeast and the microbes and that, just aren't what they should be. So in those cases, you tend to talk a lot more about the yeast. When you do a beer like a New England IPA, the water profile is is quite important to getting the balance of mouthfeel, flavour, aroma, everything right. So we'll likely be talking about the water more for that beer. So yeah, it does literally come down to what the style is that you're judging. And you'll notice this at competition. You'll be sat next to a pair of judges who could be judging a completely different style to you. And all they're talking about is yeast, water and fermentation. And all you're talking about is malt and hops. So thanks everyone then. We answered Jack's question. I think that's it all done. Thanks a lot in that case, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching Daft Cat Brewing.